crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. I further...
Let's back this up just a little bit. Right there, I think they go to question.
Investigations. I bring cases when they're ready. Having now conducted a rigorous, thorough investigation, the case was ready to be brought, and it was brought.
Mr. Bragg, the indictment says that there were 34 false business records. And it would not conceal another crime, but the indictment does not specifically say what those crimes were. We are assuming, perhaps, that they might be election-related. I'm wondering if you can specify what laws were also relevant.
So let me say as an initial matter that the indictment doesn't specify that because the law does not so require. In my remarks, I mentioned a couple of laws which I will highlight again now. The first is New York State election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. I further indicated a number of unlawful means, including more additional false statements, including statements that were planned to be made to tax authorities. I also noted the federal election law cap on contribution limits.
But why weren't there those crimes charged? Why were we charged with those crimes?
Well, I'm not going to go into our deliberative process on what was brought. The charges that were brought were the ones that were brought. The evidence in the law is the basis for those decisions.
You had expressed a year ago that you had some reservations about the case's readiness. Can you talk to us about what were some of the questions in your mind that needed to be answered in order to bring a case, with this magnitude?
I'm not going to go chapter and verse into any thinking. What I will say is, I believe the time period you're talking about, I've been in office for a couple of months. The investigation, in my view, was not concluded into the conduct in particular that is the basis for the charges today. Since that time, we've had more evidence made available to the office and opportunity to meet with additional witnesses. So as I said earlier, I've been doing this for 24 years. I don't bring cases prior to a thorough and rigorous investigation. Now, having done so, the case has been brought.
Mr. Bragg, Garrett Hake with NBC News. Your predecessor took a hard look at this case and decided not to charge it. Federal prosecutors took a hard look at this case and decided not to charge it. Do you believe you have new evidence that led you to decide to charge this, or why now?
Well, as I just mentioned, we have had available to the office additional evidence that was not in the office's possession prior to my time here. And as to your part of your question about the federal, we have a distinct and strong, I would say profound, independent interest in New York State. This is the business capital of the world. We regularly do cases involving false business statements. The bedrock, in fact, the basis for business integrity and a well-functioning business marketplace is true and accurate record keeping. That's the charge that's brought here, falsifying New York State business records.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brett. I'm just going to read back that line from your statement facts. We participants to such extent that mischaracterized for tax purposes the true nature of the payments and furtherance of the scheme. Do you allege former President Trump was one of the participants who mischaracterized the payments for tax purposes?
I'm not going to go beyond the plain language statement of facts. I think it speaks for itself.
Brett, could you please comment on the strength of the evidence that Trump personally intended violating state election law, including actions that are charged in the indictment?
So the charge is falsifying business records. The charge requires, as I specified, criminal conduct that was concealed. One of the concealed crimes we allege is New York State election law. I sort of went through in our statement of facts, which I think many of you have in front of you, goes through things including, text messages, emails, contemporaneous phone records, multiple witnesses. All of that will be, as you saw in the fall, borne out in a public courtroom in downtown Manhattan.
Last question is Jonah.
Yeah, correct. The charges that were related to the money payments is from the release from your office. also mentions another woman, Karen McNichol, as well as a doorman. Can you comment on how those players are related to the charges you've brought or to the case overall?
I'm glad you put your finger on that, because it's not just about one payment. It is 34 business records, 34 false statements in business records, and we're concealing criminal conduct. And the earlier question about New York State election law, when I talked about conspiracy to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. Those unlawful means, we allege, include the conduct set forth in the statement of facts, which is additional false statements separate and apart from the charged ones in AMI documents, planned false statements to tasking authorities. It is not just that one $130,000 wire payment. Thanks so much.
We're listening to District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who has made history today by charging twice impeached ex.
Let's go back to where he first started. I kind of got it backwards because I wanted to hear some of the questions given to him as he was making these statements.
Donald Trump and the.
Here we go.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us here today. Earlier this afternoon, Donald Trump was arraigned on a New York Supreme Court indictment returned by a Manhattan grand jury on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. Under New York State law, it is a felony to falsify business records with intent to defraud and an intent to conceal another crime. That is exactly what this case is about. 34 false statements made to cover up other crimes. These are felony crimes in New York State, no matter who you are. We cannot and will not normalize serious criminal conduct. The defendant repeatedly made false statements on New York business records. He also caused others to make false statements. The defendant claimed that he was paying Michael Cohen for legal services performed in 2017. This simply was not true. And it was a false statement that the defendant made month after month in 2017. April, May, June, and so on through the rest of the year. For 9 straight months, the defendant held documents in his hand containing this key lie, that he was paying Michael Cohen for legal services performed in 2017. And he personally signed checks for payments to Michael Cohen for each of these 9 months. In total, the grand jury found there were 34 documents with this critical false statement. Why did Donald Trump repeatedly make these false statements? The evidence will show that he did so to cover up crimes relating to the 2016 election. Donald Trump, executives at the publishing company American Media Incorporated, Mr. Cohen, and others agreed in 2015
American Media Incorporated.
election. Donald Trump, executives at the publishing company American Media Incorporated.
American Media Incorporated.
Donald Trump, executives at the publishing company American Media Incorporated, Mr. Cohen, and others agreed in 2015 to a catch and kill scheme. That is, a scheme to buy and suppress negative information to help Mr. Trump's chance of winning the election. As part of this scheme, Donald Trump and others made 3 payments to people who claimed to have negative information about Mr. Trump. To make these payments, they set up shell companies, and they made yet more false statements, including, for example, in AMI, American Media Incorporated's business records. One of the three people that they paid Why did Donald Trump repeatedly make these false statements? The evidence will show that he did so to cover up crimes relating to the 2016 election. Donald Trump, executives at the publishing company American Media Incorporated, Mr. Cohen, and others agreed in 2015 to a catch and kill scheme. Mr. Cohen and others agreed in 2015 to a catch and kill scheme. That is, a scheme to buy and suppress negative information to help Mr. Trump's chance of winning the election. As part of this scheme, Donald Trump and others made 3 payments to people who claimed to have negative information about Mr. Trump. To make these payments, they set up shell companies, and they made yet more false statements, including, for example, in AMI, American Media Incorporated's business records. One of the 3 people that they paid to keep quiet was a woman named Stormy Daniels. Less than 2 weeks before the presidential election, Michael Cohen wired $130,000 to Stormy Daniels' lawyer. That payment was to hide damaging information from the voting public. The participant scheme was illegal. The scheme violated New York election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. The conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means.
Back up a little bit more.
The participant scheme was illegal. The scheme violated New York election law, which makes it a crime to conspire to promote a candidacy by unlawful means. The $130,000 wire payment exceeded the federal campaign contribution cap, and the false statements in AMI's books violated New York law. That is why Mr. Trump made false statements about his payments to Mr. Cohen. He could not simply say that the payments were a reimbursement for Mr. Cohen's payments to Stormy Daniels. To do so, to make that true statement, would have been to admit a crime. So instead, Mr. Trump said that he was paying Mr. Cohen for fictitious legal services in 2017 to cover up actual crime committed the prior year. Paying Mr. Cohen for fictitious legal services in 2017 to cover up actual crime committed the prior year. And in order to get Michael Cohen his money back, they planned one last false statement. In order to complete the scheme, they planned to mischaracterize the repayments to Mr. Cohen as income to the New York State tax authorities. The conduct I just described, and that which was charged by the grand jury, is felony criminal conduct in New York State. True and accurate business records are important everywhere, to be sure. They are all the more important in Manhattan, the financial center of the world. That is why we have a history in the Manhattan DA's office of vigorously enforcing white-collar crime. My office, including the talented prosecutors you saw at arraignment earlier.
I want to weigh in on what he just said about New York crossing their T's and dotting their I's. If they didn't do that, they would have the same type of credibility as basically downtown Chicago, my hometown, basically where I was from, or northern Illinois. And of course, we all know that Chicago basically has a criminal record, from governors to mayors to you name it, of the dirtiest of the dirty, that gets caught periodically almost every decade. That's the reason why is because they do not have people in their office that sharpens the pencil, that crosses the T's and dots the I's. It's a very, very embarrassing reputation to have for any city, much less any town. If you cannot properly produce records that will justify whatever that you've spent and why that you've spent it, then you start working under the rim of dishonesty. One of the things that I personally liked about Georgia, and I didn't know this until I was working over in Georgia in the Atlanta district, is that at the end of the year, it is their law that they have to balance their budget. And let me make sure I got my facts straight here. In 2006, whenever I was over there, they was having some hard times then. But then whenever I come back to Atlanta in 2009, after I'd been out to Oklahoma, they was sure enough suffering through some hard times, to the degree that they was actually forcing their employees to work off of furloughs. And the reason why that they was asking them to work out of furloughs was basically they was, I don't want to use the word blackmail, but what they was doing, they was telling their employees, we have over budgeted, we're all going to have to be in this thing together, and if not, there's going to possibly be charges, and the charges could possibly even float down your way towards us trying to get out of this clinker that we're in. Of course, you keep in mind that at that time, the bubble burst happened. Gasoline went out of sight. But I admired the fact that Atlanta had their own self-governing system within their state to govern themselves, to make sure that every year they have a balanced budget. If the state of Illinois, and especially the state of California, would have those same type of policies, we would not be in near the shape that we're in right now in regards towards this indebtedness. Now, there's no doubt, according to their records, there has been some bamboozling going on. I'm going to use that word, bamboozling. Taking records and changing them and using this to do that and doing this to do that. But I got a question. This investigation has been a 3-year investigation. How come they have waited so late before they have waited to basically present their case? And under the statute limitation law, some of them things that they're talking about actually exceeds the limitation of the statutes. I don't know if their record shows that these records are flimsy or not, but if they are true, I hope that they persecute Donald J. Trump to the fullest extent of the law. I don't know what that's going to regard. I don't know if that's going to be heavy penalties. I don't know if that's going to be jail time. I don't know what. But whatever that he has done to violate their principles, I hope that justice will be served here. Now, the deal with Donald Trump and January the 6th, that is a complete, total different deal in comparison to what he's facing right now in his own hometown. in his own home state, basically. I know this. I heard a while ago that it has costed New York City for extra security and extra this and extra that and take care of this and take care of that of $200 million. In other words, what you've seen today was basically the grand enchilada of what that it has costed for New York City to take a prior president and hold him for committing crimes. I hope to God that whatever that they're talking about exceeds the money value of what the $200 million costed the taxpayers today, because if not, it's going to look I ain't going to say it's going to look fraudulent. It's not fraudulent, but it's going to look fraudulent in the aspect that now they have got a dime waiting on a penny, or a dollar waiting on a quarter. I don't know if you've ever heard that expression or not. I have. That, wow, this looks like a dollar waiting on a 50-cent piece or whatever. And whenever it reaches that level, then is whenever it could come back and haunt them in their proceedings on who allows for them to stay in power and who votes them out. That's my opinion. I have a right to my opinion. And I've just got to voice my opinion on what's going on here. In other words, they strained at a gnat to swallow a camel. I hope that the gnat is going to exceed $200 million plus, in which what it costed today the taxpayers of all the extra security and all the extra stuff that was produced in regards towards the safety issues. I hope and pray that if not, it's going to look like a mockery. It ain't necessarily going to look like a sham, but it will look like a mockery, because basically what you have is a dime waiting on a penny. You're going to hold up a dime just to be able to make a penny? Is that good, practical, logical business sense to do that? Yeah, you may have embarrassed him. Yeah, you may have gotten back some of your money. Yeah, you made it all public. But at the same time, what did it cost the state of New York to do that? Like I said, I don't know what the bottom figure is going to be in all this. I'm pretty sure that they got a pretty good idea. But I also heard a while ago that it was going to cost somewhere around $200 million that it was going to cost the taxpayers for this little shindig going on today, because it just didn't go on today. It took a matter of a couple, 2 or 3 weeks to get everything properly involved. You got to set this up, set that up. You got to take special. I mean, they had roads, they had highways and interstate systems shut down today. Businesses shut down today. In other words, they put the city on halt because of this. This is what our State of the Union now has to look in the mirrors by them impeaching Donald J. Trump, not once but twice. And no, he never did get vindicated. And yes, we had a state, Tennessee Congress or Senator Alexander, that made reference to the point that yes, Donald Trump done wrong, but it wasn't serious enough that he should have to resign or be impeached or basically lose his job over it. Okay? All right. That was his opinion. He's got a right to his opinion. But that was then. Whenever he made that opinion, during the time that Donald Trump was president, either right before or during COVID. Now, since all the smoke is cleared in regards towards Donald Trump making those statements and doing what he done in his presidency, in which he done a lot of good. He really did. But he also done some bad. This is part of the bad that's now coming out along with January the 6th. So you can add this to the pile along with the Atlanta charges, along with some more other charges from somewhere else. I think altogether he's got about 4 or 5 different piles that will add up into the big pile, the way I understand it. But it all falls back in responsibilities towards our Congress. Our Congress is part of the State of the Union. As far as I am concerned, since now this has been brought out the way that it's been brought out, and they didn't take care of the problem way before now, they're still haggling and spending millions upon millions and millions of dollars of tax-paying money, taking up time, taking up precious time that people should be looking at other interests that's affecting people's lives. Once more, straining at a gnat to swallow a camel, per se. I personally believe that the State of the Union, being trillions of dollars in debt, now taking away insurance, Medicare insurance from people that no longer are considered candidates for the insurance, as well as all the drugs, all the guns, all the suicides, all the illegal immigrants, all the jobs leaving America. I personally believe that the State of the Union has failed we the people. Now, according to the way that I understand the Constitution that was written for we the people, whenever it comes to the degree that our government can no longer provide safety, security, and prosperity for its own people, then is whenever it's time for the people to take back over the government, to take back over their country because of their government. I know that I've said in the past that the best way of doing that is voting people out. But by voting people out takes tremendous amount of time, takes tremendous amount of haggling, takes tremendous amount of money. And the thing about it is, whenever it comes to draining the swamp, if you don't drain all the swamp towards doing a full sweep, odds are the contamination that's still in the swamp is going to come back and contaminate the waters again that you thought that you had cleared. I believe personally, because of the imbalances that was created more so during the Civil War than any other time, not so much of slavery, because I myself am against slavery. I think it's wrong. I think that all men are created equal. That's what they have been teaching us and telling us all along, coming out of the United States government. But yet no, we're $30-something trillion in debt. Yet no, they cannot provide a safety, secure environment for us to raise our children up in. And we don't know from one day to another, from 1 week to another, if we put our children on a school, or whether or not they're going to come back in a body bag or not. They just got through protesting this yesterday up in Nashville. I think it was yesterday, it may have been the day before, protesting that very same thing. I don't know how many children that it was that protested this, but they come up to the Capitol building telling them about the red flag laws, that obviously these people in Tennessee don't feel like that they need red flag laws. I don't know why they don't think that. You know, whenever it comes to a bunch of yahoos over here in Tennessee, you got to admit that they have taken things way out of perspective in comparison to what they was supposed to have been like even going back into the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, as far as being the great volunteer state. Now let's get back on Donald J. Trump. We know, we've seen it with our own eyes, that Donald J. Trump was trying his best to steal the election, especially working with Rudy Giuliani and other people that he was associated with in his party, that they was trying to break rank, and that's what it amounts to. They was trying to break rank in saying, no, I'm still the president, and Mr. Biden, you are not. My point is this. We all know the truth in what happened January the 6th. Now we know the truth about this, in which there's no doubt, I'm pretty sure, that they have validated proof to be able to back up their claim. And if they didn't, I'm pretty sure that they never would have presented this case the way that they did. My point is this. Out of all the affairs that our State of the Union has been a part of, it has been a ongoing, rumbling, long-term event that has led all of us down this endless road of doom and gloom. And this was the very thing that our Southern ancestors fought for, by being able to be in control of our own affairs. That obviously it was a toss-up between the North and the South, and as soon as the North won, then the North become in control of the Southern affairs, because then they unionized their decision in United States of America. And there was nothing wrong with that concept. There was nothing at all wrong with that concept in what that they was going to do and how that they was going to go about doing it, if they would have succeeded. The State of the Union has not succeeded in those endeavors. A matter of fact, the State of the Union has showed their behindies. They have showed their behindies in this. They have showed their behindies in that. They have showed their behindies in not being able to protect us through 9/11. They have showed their behindies in allowing for all the jobs to go south. They have showed their behindies when it comes to where we are today, going into Donald J. Trump's personal life, leading into the January 6th deal. Because of all the above, for the past 30 plus years, this government has failed its own people. Now, going back to the Constitution, according to the Constitution, the insurrection law was put there for a reason. And the reason was that if our government could no longer take care of its people's affairs promptly and professionally, and as far as I'm concerned, what went on today was not a professional event. Though they did keep the wolf off of their trail, there was always that possibility that somebody could have done something that would have been illegitimate, and it could have been, somebody within their own precinct. Could have been one of their own Secret Service agents. It could have been one of the New York deputies or police. You just don't never know. You just don't really never know what's around the corner. And if I was working in the detail of Secret Service, I would have made sure that Donald Trump had a vest on today. I would have made sure that before he stepped out of that vehicle, that he would have had a bulletproof vest on. That's how serious that things have become. But let's not take our eye off of the big picture towards focusing on all these little pictures. The big picture still goes back to the United States government. It goes back to whenever the Civil War was first fought, and then whenever the Union basically won the war, the North, because they was more educated, they had more money, they was more conformed than the South was. Okay? But also keep in mind that it was the North that had many, many more slaves than what the South ever thought about. And it was the North that had basically utilized towards commercializing that particular trade at that time. So whenever the commotion started up in White House, and there was basically a battle, then Lincoln at the time had to come up with some sort of reasonable explanation of why in the world what started this, what's going on here. And that's whenever they pointed their finger at the slave industry. That's whenever they told the South that you could no longer have slaves. The Civil War was not about legalizing slavery. It was about abolishing slavery, because the North had already legalized slavery in 2 different states. So now all of a sudden you're going to tell the Southerners that had their eye on that same industry, that same predominant corporation, now you're going to tell them that they can't no longer function and do like the North had been doing for years, which was in a sense like jerking the biscuit out of the Southern people's mouth and telling them, do as we tell you to do and not as we do. It was a very, very hypocritical motive that the North took on in regards towards the slave trade. There's no doubt. I'm against slaves. I'm against anybody not being treated equal in the eyes of the American laws, and especially in the eyes of God. Because as far as I'm concerned, we all are equal. We all are equal, and we should be treated as equal. Period. But we can see where the North manipulated their way by convincing the South that they were smarter, they were stronger, and that they had all the answers to all the questions, and that the Southern people were just supposed to raise up their hands and say, okay. Just like the government told the Indians, give up your guns and we will protect you. They told the Native American people, whenever they was trying to genocide them, give up your guns and we will protect you. We have heard one malicious lie after another, and now the proof is in the pudding towards how far that our State of the Union has gotten in left field pertaining to our republic. And you got to admit that that's what they was fighting for. They was fighting for superiority. They was fighting for domination. And they won it. They won it hands down. The North won the Civil War, conquered the South. Well, now, all these years later, we can see in what kind of a outlandish mess that the North, in actuality, has done. Now, there's no doubt there's been some unforeseeables that's happened with our country, regardless whether it was 9/11 or other major events. Nobody asked for COVID, but it come. We know that it was possibly engineered by human form, but to be able to prove it's another thing. But it's one thing to get off balance a little bit, but to get off balance $30 plus trillion? For surely to God, people can see now that the Union has failed us. They have failed us financially. They have failed us as far as protecting us. They have allowed for all this ungodliness stuff to come into play. Now people like out in California are wanting to take hardcore criminals to where they used to get 10 years. Now validate them towards them only getting 5, where they used to get 2 years. Now they're only having to do a year. Basically letting criminals out of jail because they don't have enough jails. The system is regurgitating up onto itself right now. And unless we're smart enough and creative enough to say enough is enough, to go in and remanufacture a brand new system, and you got to admit that the State of the Union pertaining to our republic is a system. But in the system was supposed to have been set up safeguards that Ronald Reagan took away from the government whenever he decided that he was no longer, that the American people no longer had to back their American currency with gold. And it was basically the same thing that Donald Trump done with the banking industry after 2009, whenever our Congress once more all got all together and they made a decision. Okay, let's say it happens again. Let's say there's going to be another bubble burst. Whenever it does, we're not going to bail out General Motors. We're not going to bail out Chrysler. We're not going to bail out the banking industries. We're not going to bail out the real estate market. We're not going to bail out all these other people that costed the American people once more about $1 trillion in that bailout. That even to this day, they still can't figure out where all the money went. They made a law. And their law said, we will not do this again. Well, less than 2 weeks ago, maybe 3, I may have my days off a little bit, over the weekend, they understood that there was a failure in some of the banking industries. Over that weekend, they used the powers of the presidential purse to basically go in under those presidential powers and reverse what Congress had already passed to be able to bail out certain banks because they had gotten in trouble, primarily because part of it was COVID and the other part was the rising of the oil industry, the way that the oil companies jabbed everybody. So they decided to refrain from that law. So by me seeing what's happening, how it's happening, when it's happening, all the above, makes me wonder what kind of people would even go so far as passing a law that, like I said, Donald Trump in his presidency took out some of those restrictions to where the banking industry no longer had to provide proof of where they was in the red. And by doing so, it basically gave them a license to go back to their same old ways, to their same old tricks in violating financial principles. In the process of the violation of the financial principles, along with COVID and along with the price jabbing, it has caused some banking ripples. Matter of fact, this morning I seen where there was another bank that was being affected by the first bank or the second bank that got bailed out, that now there's another bank that's prone of collapsing and folding. So by looking at the proof being in the pudding, putting all the dots together for the past 30 some odd years, going from a nation that had great pride, that had a sense of security, that had jobs for its people, that didn't have all this crime and all these school shootings and all this gun violence, going from where we was versus where we are today, it's undeniable that we have taken 1 step forward and 2 steps back whenever it comes to being a civilized society. Whose fault is that? It's a little bit of all of us fault, okay? But the fact of the matter is, it was the Union, it was the North that said that they was smarter, they was stronger, they was more capable of running the country. Well, we've seen now how you've run the country. You have run the country in the ground. You have caused hardship after hardship after hardship upon to the American people. And stuff just like this right here that's going on. And why in the world that they waited for so long to basically throw this into the air towards trying to make up for some of the things that Donald Trump obviously done, why they have waited for so long, especially since January 6th took place. It's very questionable. And how come they waited for this period of time? But I guess that's neither here nor there neither, because that's one of the little circles that's obviously making the big circle. What is the big circle? The big circle is the fact that our United States politicians for the past 30 plus years have failed the American people. Whenever it comes to the insurrection laws was put there for this very purpose. That once we realized that we got a bunch of kooks working up there in the White House. And whenever I say the White House, I ain't just talking about one person. I'm talking about trickling all the way down to basically the federal government aspect of it. Whenever we realize that we haven't got nothing but a bunch of kooks up there that is leading us down this endless road of doom and gloom, that's whenever it's time for the people to rise up and take back over their country. And yes, reform a new established government that will no longer be kicking the can down the road. I don't even think that they've come to an agreement yet pertaining to raising the debt ceiling. Why do you want to continue to raise the debt ceiling whenever you know within about 6 months from now or a year from now, after you raise the debt ceiling, you're going to come pass and hit the debt ceiling mark? Now, Biden will get up there and he'll lie to us and he'll tell you, oh, we saved $1 trillion over here. Well, if you saved $1 trillion over there and we're still compassing the debt ceiling every time the debt ceiling gets raised, my God, what would it have been like if somebody didn't cross all the T's and dot all the I's towards saving $1 trillion over here? How many trillions of dollars in debt would we actually be if there wasn't some compromising going on pertaining to the money issues? Like I said, I really took a lot of interest in the Georgia laws once I was there working in Douglasville and working outside of Kennesaw for Gerber Collision and Glass. I really took a lot of interest in seeing at that time in 2009 how that they had set up all these different places for rescue services pertaining to the people needing extra help. They needed funds, they needed food, they needed this. And I was actually motivated by them in seeing how that they was operating and seeing what they was doing and seeing at the end of the year basically putting out all those furloughs to all them government state workers that said, you know what, this is what's going to happen. You're gonna work for this amount of money, and we're basically going to hold back a certain amount of money to make up for the differences, because at the end of the year we still have to balance our budget according to our laws. Which leads me to another question, talking about state rights. How come that law is not engaged in all 52 states? Because that law in and of itself would be a safeguard in making sure, even at the expense of doing furloughs at the end of the year, that everybody was going to stay within the confines of their means. Well, whenever you got states that don't have that law, that means they can bamboozle the records. They can borrow from Paul to pay Peter, knowing they're never going to pay Peter back, and it's just an endless vicious circle. Just like the state of Illinois has been playing, just like the state of California has been playing, and just like other states has been playing. I admire the fact that the city of New York thinks enough of their residency, their citizens there, that it is mandated for them to sharpen their pencil and to catch the white crime lawbreakers. That way they can stand accountable. But why did they wait for so long? That's the question at hand pertaining to that. As far as I'm concerned, the union our Congress, our government has failed its people. Now it's going to be up to the people and where they go with this from here. Because I promise you, in keeping the same people that's in power now, by keeping them in there that obviously don't know their asses from a hole in the ground, we're only going to continue to go in this endless cycle towards taking one step forward and two steps back. And I mean, the proof is in the pudding, in what we're seeing, and what we're experiencing, what we're tangibly witnessing. It's not the first time that disarray has happened to our country, but my point is this: whenever it comes to the protection of this great nation, if there was something really, really horribly bad fixing to come around the corner, regardless whether it was coming from Russia or coming from China or coming from whoever or whatever, are we balanced enough pertaining to having oil refineries backed up? Are we balanced enough towards still being able to make out checks to people and pay young men and women that's willing to die for our country? Or are we going to have to write out IOUs? Are we balanced enough to still maintain and stand on our own feet, knowing good and well that we have been kicking the can down the road for all these years pertaining to the debt ceiling? Come on. If you can't see the trees for the forest, as the old saying goes, you can't see the trees for the forest, then obviously you need to quit looking at the forest and you need to start looking back at the trees. You need to start looking back at the people that's been in charge of these matters, that has caused this calamity, or this some people call it a travesty. Be it as it may, you can call it whatever you want to call it, but the bottom line is this: we got a bunch of people that obviously have made idiots out of us. And me, as a red-blooded American, pertaining to my sovereignty of my country, I'm getting tired of various people that we elect that either are crooks, or they don't know what they're doing, or they're basically making idiots out of all of us. And it's embarrassing. This is one of the saddest days, one of the saddest, that America, since our founding forefathers, this is one of the saddest days that will go in history towards going on, along with the rest of all the other sad occurrences that's went on. This is kind of like the cherry on top. You know what I'm saying? And it's a heartbreak from A to Z. It's a heartbreak.
Has charged hundreds of felony falsifying business records.
Hundreds.
This charge, it can be said, is the bread and butter of our white-collar work. The fraud presents itself in all different forms here in Manhattan. We've charged falsifying business records for those who violated federal bank secrecy laws. We have charged falsifying business records for those who were seeking to cover up sex crimes. And we have brought this charge for those who committed tax violations. At its core, this case today is one with allegations like so many of our white-collar cases. Allegations that someone lied again and again to protect their interests and evade the laws to which we are all held accountable. As this office has done time and time again, we today uphold our solemn responsibility to ensure that everyone stands equal before the law. No amount of money and no amount of power changes that enduring American principle. I'll now take questions.
Right.
But my point is this: whenever you have to spend $200 million for extra security in a city as big as New York City, does the odds outweigh the means? Or are you truly straining at a gnat to swallow a camel whenever it's all said and done, with the bottom line that out of all the money that supposedly Donald Trump swindled from these people, do you think that it would come up to $200 million? $200 million. That's a lot of money to be passed on down to the to the taxpayers just to put on this type of a shindig. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of man hours. That's a lot of responsibilities that went on to make this happen today. It is so, so sad. Good luck to each and every one of us. At the Windmill Ministries Missions, we want to say God bless you and God bless your prayers. God bless your time and your interest in those that has been keeping up with some of the material that we've been putting out for the past 3.5, 4 years to social media platform. We want to thank social media platform for allowing for us to be able to tell our story and bring out these we believe crucial facts that a lot of times it's not what you're looking at but how that you're looking at it that makes all the difference in the world towards the smoke screens that obviously has cheated the younger generation of their futures here in America because of whatever reason. I could go down to probably 1,000 different reasons why that our children today, the reason why the suicide rate is as high as it is, because the way that they look at it, there is no future for America, financially speaking. And because of it, they wasn't born with a silver spoon in their mouth. They have resorted to crime. And you can say, well, they didn't have to resort to crime. No, they didn't have to resort to crime. They could have been a beggar out on the street. But these adults and these predominant business people that stole from the system, that broke the system down, do you not think that they should be held accountable? Because they did not provide for we the people. And because of it, the system is broken. It has not provided in its promises and its endeavors of the reason why that the Civil War ever took place to begin with. The North has basically made asses out of themselves. Because keep in mind, they was the ones that had all the might. They was the ones that had all the smarts. They was the ones that said, we're stronger than the South and we can dominate you, in which they did. They whipped their asses. But at the same time, they made promises that now we're going to start working equal. We're going to be as a country with fair-minded, and we're going to divide things out into states, and then people's going to have state rights, but we're going to work as a unit here. Called the State of the Union. Called our Republic. Our State of the Union has failed us in regards towards the broken system. We'll always have a republic as long as we are a country that allows freedom of speech and allows for us to vote in and out our politicians. We will always have a democracy. But who's going to be in charge of that democracy? What state of the union is going to be calling the shots, are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, that has caused this kind of damage to erode not only our pride, but erode our livelihoods? I have never seen so much chaoticness in my 62 years as what I have witnessed just within the past, I'm going to say 5 to 7 years. Basically, since I've come back here, since I've come back to Northwest Tennessee in 2014, which was 9 years ago, I have never seen so much embarrassing ungodliness, number one, and number two, I've never been let down by our system so many times in so many different ways as I have for the past 9 years. And I think a lot of people can vouch and say the same thing, really. I'm not the only one. I'm not the Lone Ranger out here. I'm not the only one. There's millions of us that have gotten the short end of the stick. Now, the Russians, they want to blame the Western world by saying that they have been cheated. Well, maybe the very same people that was cheating us and has cheated us, maybe they was the ones that really was cheating the Russians. I don't know. I don't know what kind of affairs that they was playing with the Russians. I don't think it's right in what Putin's doing right now towards killing innocent men, women, and children. I don't think that's debatable. Using those heathenistic, barbaric tactics towards killing men, women, and children. Blowing up schools and daycare centers and maternity wards. We're going to have to get a thumb on this. We're going to have to get a handle on this. And if we don't, I'm telling you now, we're heading down the wrong path. And at the end of the path, it is going to be one of the most miserablest conflicts that not only the American people are going to have to receive or go through, but the world in general. We are heading towards great tribulation. Unless we are smart enough to identify the problems and then do something about them. I do not believe in violence. I was hoping all along that we would be able to be strong enough and logical enough to be able to pull ourselves out of this in a professional type democratic way. Obviously, that ain't working. That ain't working. And it's a sad, sad state of affairs of what we're looking at today. Probably some of the saddest. Along with all the other stuff that has occurred in the past 30 plus years. Going to war with a country and then walking away from it. And within 10 or 11 days, the Taliban takes the country back over. I just pray to God that God is merciful unto all of us. I really do. I pray to God that God, just as whenever Jesus was hanging on the cross, that said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. I hope our Heavenly Father will be able to look at this situation and say, well, obviously, they was bamboozled. They was deceived. They was misled. They was lied to. Just as the old saying goes, the best of plans between man and beast sometimes does go astray. You know where it went astray at? During the time of Ronald Reagan's administration. That's where we started going astray. Was it done intentionally? Was it done ignorantly? I don't know. I can't answer those questions. I know somebody that can one day. Whenever we all stand in front of the great white throne judgment, I guarantee you there's going to be one particular person that's going to know all our motives, all our thoughts towards what we done, how we done it, why we done it. He's going to be able to look at our greed, our selfishness, and also going to be able to look at the good things that we've done towards being able to reward us for those good things. I want to thank you for listening. Pray for our great country. Pray for our troops. May God bless our troops. And pray for our endeavors towards where we go from here, just as Ronald Reagan talked about the time capsule, which is now 30 years in behind us. So for the next 70 years, what we do as a nation is going to make that determination of what Ronald Reagan was talking about, as far as if we dug it up 100 years from now, which would be 70 years now, what in the world is the world going to say about us? Well, Mr. Ronald Reagan, you should have thought about that whenever you decided to eliminate or to basically brush off the Holy Spirit pertaining to the testimony that I sent up to the White House pertaining to 9 tapes. You should have thought about that whenever you decided to blackball the ministry. You should have thought about that whenever you decided that you was going to put the responsibility in other people's hands whenever you yourself could have taken the initiative towards doing the right thing for not just the country, but also for our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Obviously, you didn't want to do that. Obviously, people around you must have told you other things that convinced you towards you not doing that. And between the Reagans and the Bushes and all the other presidencies that we've seen come and go, this is what this is basically the cherry on top. Want to say thank you for your prayers. Thank you for your time. God bless you. And most of all, we want to say shalom to each and every one of us out there who are searching for righteousness, justice, and fairness for all through our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Thank you.